All right.
I always have to wait for the numbers to start to pop up for the folks who are waiting in the queue. We get people who are very prompt sometimes, so that's always fun. Okay, here we go. Our audience members are popping in. All right, and I am a stickler for time because I want to make sure that we have enough time for Q&A. So, ladies and gents, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. If you are here to learn about preparing your enrollment marketing engine for a high performance admission cycle, I know that's a lot of words, but you've come to the right place. So welcome. Lori and I are going to jump into the content in just a second, but we'll start with some introductions. So for folks who don't know me, I'm Angela Brown. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Halda. I have been here since the end of March. Previously, I was at Niche, and before that, I spent 7 years in-house as the Director of Marketing Communications at a K-12 independent school. So I've spent lots of time at this point in education. I love it. It is my absolute favorite thing. And I love doing things like this, where we get to hopefully share some really awesome information with all of you. Lori, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Angela. My name is Lori Kukuck. I'm the Director of Enrollment Services at Lynn University in Boca Raton, Florida. I oversee the marketing and communication side of the house for our admission team. Our VP oversees admission, enrollment management, financial aid, and advancement. So I do tend to help out in other areas. I've been here for 27 years, so I guess I could say higher ed has been my life at this point in time. But I'm happy to, speak with Angela today and to speak, in front of all of you guys. And please go easy on me. This is like my first time doing a chat like this, so I'm looking forward to it.
Everyone be nice to Lori. I think we've got a good group, and we would love to hear where all of you are joining us from. So please drop that into the chat while we jump into the content. So I'm going to start with some housekeeping, starting with the most important question that you probably have. Is the webinar being recorded? Yes, it is. Of course, that recording will hit your inbox tomorrow, along with some fun resources based on the topics that we covered today. So keep an eye out for that. If you have a question or want to contribute, you do not have to wait until the end. So yes, we are going to do some Q&A at the very end, but if you want to poke at something that we say, or you have a question, or there's a tool that we're talking about and you want to offer some feedback, please do that in the chat. It's the best thing short of coming off mute, which unfortunately we can't allow you to do, to participate in this conversation. So please do that. We would love to see it. And then the last thing I want to mention is that I did notice that we have a few K-12 schools with us today. So the good news is you're in good company. This is still going to be super relevant for you. And we're happy to do some translation if and when we need to. Just pop it into the chat. So why in the world are we talking about this to begin with? And why right now? So as you all know, if you want to really have the best possible enrollment cycle, you got to make sure that you do some housekeeping and all of your ducks are in a row. So starting with your data, having clean, accurate data is really, really important. You're going to see that as a bit of a recurring theme here. One thing that I personally was surprised to find out is that your data can decay at a pretty rapid clip over the course of every year. So really, really important, because your data is basically going bad, like the produce that you have the best of intentions of using and kind of put in the fridge. That's what's happening to your data on a regular basis. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention. Same thing with your website, accessibility, mobile responsiveness, those things are all important. Making sure that you are in step, not just with students' expectations and family expectations, but also regulatory expectations. Those are things that have a tendency to pop up that you want to make sure that you're paying attention to. As we talk about comm flows, that's going to be one of the topics that we're covering today. I have a couple data points for you from EAB, but the headline is the more personalized, we say at Halda, Individualized is even better, but the more custom your message is, the better it's going to land. It makes students happier. It makes them want to engage with you more. It makes them feel more connected to you. And it's also more relevant. And we'll double down on that a little bit later in the presentation. To continue with AI, so we're an AI company, spoiler alert, right? And I would hope that most of you, if you're not actively engaged in using AI, you at least have an interest, you're dipping your toe in the water before you go completely crazy, or even if you have gone completely crazy and you're trying to clean things up a little bit, make sure that, again, your data's clean, make sure you've got some policies in place. I know that's a really sticky point for people, and the AI and College Admissions Special Interest Group through NACAC actually has a really incredible database of policies that we'll be sharing with you in the follow-up tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. And then invest in training your staff and make sure that you've got the right tools in place to use AI effectively, but also responsibly. And then finally, tech stack optimization. So if you want to do anything efficiently when it comes to technology, you want to make sure that you're optimizing that tech stack. So keep all of these things in mind. You're dealing with a lot of data. You want to have the correct tools and data analysis to be able to make continuous tweaks to your marketing tactics. All of that is possible if you've got your tech stack nice and tight. Now, if you understand this reference, congratulations, it means that you're as old as I am. But when you bring all of this together, you have the foundation for a high-performing admissions cycle. And that is what we are here to cover. So I'm going to kick things over to Lori to take a deeper dive into each of these areas. And I'll be chiming in here and there and keeping an eye on the chat.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Angela. Data hygiene, as Angela mentioned, looking at the data decay and, keeping your database clean and the information relevant, to the students that you're trying to service. We always talk about the data is only as good as the data that you put in. You don't want to put good data in after bad data, or just, continue upon building upon bad data. It's, we've gone through this several times here at Lynn with changes of CRMs over the past few years. And when I say the past few years, there was a point in time where we changed CRMs in the admission office. I want to say it was 3 or 4 times in like 10 years, which is a lot of change in a relatively short amount of time. And I was involved in each and every one of those. And we have now said we are happy to say we are a slate institution. And my counterpart in our operations team, I think we've both said if we ever need to change again, we're probably done. We're not going to handle it. We're not going to trying to clean up that data, even though you think it's really good in one system, when you pull it all out and you're trying to figure out how to go into that next system, it can just be overwhelming. So we're very keen on that data hygiene and constantly looking at what we have in our system, especially as we go and start prepping for each new enrollment cycle. We work with several partners, and data is king in our office. Data is, it's what we live and breathe on here, so we want to make sure that we're building upon a solid foundation, that the analytics that we're getting from the data makes sense. But if we have some really crummy data in there, it's not going to help us in the long run. So, we do a lot from our side with audit queries in our database to make sure that we're constantly looking at things and we're purging, weird records that come in, or records that come in that are incomplete, that don't have enough actionable information on there. Why are we going to keep them in there? Why are we going to let them drag down our numbers, screw up our completion rates and things like that? So we're constantly looking at that and evaluating what we have in our system, how to make it better. What are our retention policies? How long do we keep data in the system, so that when we bring in new technology, when we bring, new ideas or strategies to the table, we're working with a great foundation of good actionable data. So I think, anybody in any position in an admission office would probably, have those same feelings when it comes to that. And I think the next slide talks about, some of those data, cleaning in step by step, like I was just talking, the CRM housekeeping. I think that's absolutely key. We have somebody on our staff. We're fortunate enough to have somebody on our staff who lives and breathes Slate and is day in, day out, does nothing but work within our CRM, along with other people who were in there for the majority of their role. But just trying to see what we can do to make things run smoothly and efficiently and effectively in our office. How long do we keep stuff in there so that we're not constantly seeing, system lags because of the amount of data that we have? And if we don't need it, or if it was captured multiple ways, we can, try and figure out what to do with that. And, having, the rules of how things go in, what are your naming conventions, making sure, are we using sentence case, are we using title case, if we're building queries and saving queries, do we build them for me as Lori, or do we build them for my position, so that if I were to leave, somebody who comes into that position has, a naming convention already established for them, and it's not, Lori Kukuck all throughout the system. It's, I have a number, I'm admin O2, AD O2. That's what I live and breathe by in our system. So having those data rules that we, try to establish throughout our team, it's tough. People, sometimes they just work really hard and great in it, and then you see it kind of lacking, as time goes by and things like that. So we're just trying to, not every day, not be big brother, but there are points and times, maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's, bi-yearly, when we have time, admission, everybody, no matter what the role, time is, one of our most valuable commodities. So trying to figure out when to go in and do these system checks is sometimes difficult, but we have rules, within our system. We have some validation points. We have, retention policies and duplicate policies and all of those things that we're, some run by themselves, some we look at on a weekly basis and things like that. But we are trying to stay on top of it so that it stays manageable, so that you don't get to a point in time when it's, you're getting ready for now fall 26 recruitment. It's unbelievable that I just said that. But fall 26 recruitment, and
It's coming.
it's coming. I mean, we haven't run in fall 25 yet. We're already, it's the life of somebody in the admission office. But we have people who are, that assign ownership, 0.5 there. We know that we have people who are looking at it. They don't do it all day, every day, but we know that they're looking at it so that we don't come up upon this mountain of, tasks that we have to do to get ready for that next cycle. If we do it in manageable chunks, it makes things so much easier in the process.
I think that's a great point. And I also am conscious of the fact that, a lot of folks are facing budget cuts. We've heard from some of our own partners who have lost their slate captains, because those roles are being eliminated. And, for the K-12ers on the call who may have very, very small teams, and, they might be a team of one who's trying to manage the database and comms and dabbling in fundraising as well. And so hopefully, these are tips that all of you can use. That's definitely the goal here, is to try to support folks who have a lot of resources, folks who may not have as many, and folks who are somewhere in between. These are all things that I think are really important to keep in mind, no matter what types of resources you're working with, to make sure that everything is buttoned up going into the next cycle.
Yeah. And I think, the next slide, talking about some of those tools and practices, we talked about those monthly cleanups, or, those validations and the regular checks. We use predominantly, our tools are just within Slate itself, running rules and, adding audit queries. We want to look for specific students who might not have XYZ piece of information on their record, so that we can investigate why. But there's, like Angela has on the slide, some specific tools, for Google Sheets or Excel, if you want to, bring some data out and, kind of scrub it and then, pump it back into the system. We're finding that now our advancement team is going to be moving into Slate as well as their system of record. And folks on our admission side, while we're not advancement professionals, we can kind of give them, some of the guidance and, knowledge that we have, to avoid some of those pitfalls when you're grabbing data out of one system and putting it into a new system, and, help them through the nuances of Slate. The information is different. The process is different, from an advancement standpoint versus an admission standpoint, but the system is the same. How you can extract information from the system is the same. It's Slate. So we're trying to help them learn from our mistakes, when we implemented Slate, about 5.5 years ago at this point. So it's just
Wow.
getting into the habit of looking at things and not just, don't just put it in there once and forget about it and never look at it again.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta
Mm-hmm.
gotta stay on top of what you have to know how it's working, to know what changes you might need to make things more, we talk about being efficient, effective, and extraordinary here in our office. It's our 3 E's here.
I love
So
that.
we bring that, we try to bring that into every facet of what we're doing. How can we make the tools that we have available for us, more effective and more efficient so that we're better spending our time elsewhere. And I
I
think that's
love that.
important, trying to find those little things that can make your life better, whether it's automation or audits or whatever it is. Again, doing it in little chunks so you don't have to do everything all at once. I tell people all the time, if you can spend 5 minutes a day doing something, it's better doing that than spending 30 minutes at the end of the day when you have not enough time to get through it.
Yeah, I use, believe it or not, I use that same advice with my 12-year-old is just chunk it out, break it into smaller pieces so it doesn't feel like this giant
Mhm.
insurmountable project. That's
Exactly.
such great advice. So now we're going to talk about website optimization, starting with some very baseline things.
Yeah, it's when it comes to mobile responsiveness and the ADA compliance, that's huge. I'm lucky enough that I get to work very closely with the university's marketing and communication team, who have oversight on our .edu site, and that is something that they are constantly looking at. What is working, what isn't working, what needs to be improved, making sure that we are ADA compliant, using alt text when it comes to things, making sure that layout looks good, that it looks good on mobile. I've often like, well, why is this over here and not over here? They're like, well, Lori, if you remember, you might be on your laptop all day, but not everybody is. They're looking at it on their phone,
Yeah.
on their tablet. So, it's those types of things that sometimes I forget about because I'm not in that on the daily, and I have to make sure that other people, that's why it works when you work with a team. It's not just one person who's responsible for something, to make sure that we're doing things in the right way at the right time and having it positioned in the right place on our website so that it makes sense for me and my team from an admission standpoint, but also for the marketing team and the university as a whole. I can't, overstep when it comes to brand and identity and things like that. We all have to work together, for the common goals of everything that we're trying to achieve, talking about CTAs, working to change what the CTA is, where is it placed, where does it lead to, those are conversations that we are continually having. It's again, not just you put a CTA up there and you leave it there because that's what we've always done. You know,
Yes.
we I'm fortunate enough to work with several people, a lot of people where we have those types of conversations. If this isn't working, let's try something else. And, we've made changes over the past several years into how we collect data, where we collect data, and why we collect it to make sure we're doing it in the right way for the right reason.
That's perfect. And that's how we've always done it for me is one of the most dangerous phrases in our industry because it really does it stops innovation in its tracks, but it also keeps you from getting better. That continuous improvement is something that's really, really necessary. And you can't set and forget any of the things that we're talking about here. One thing that I do want to kind of double click on for a second is the CTAs, because I think this is one thing in particular, and this is cross K-12, across higher ed, where we kind of have our list, most of these items are on the left side of this table that are just kind of, those are the go-tos, right? You slap those on your website and or form and you go like that and you're done, or you put it on an ad or whatever the use case may be. And so this slide is part of Halda's Shifts recruitment framework. And this is something that if you have seen us present in the past, in the recent past, I should say, you may have seen this. We have a whole blog post about it that really takes a deep dive into each of the letters in the acronym that I'll share in the resources that you receive tomorrow. But this specific piece is focused on how you can provide a CTA that's more conversational and more grounded in meeting a need instead of just pushing someone to a next step. And so the surveying piece of this, it replaces traditional CTAs like the ones that you see on the left with things that are more intentional and student-centric. And so we've got this in sort of a handy before and after style chart for you so that you have some inspiration. But the blog post will take a really deep dive into the other pieces of this and just how you can kind of rethink the way that you're connecting with prospective students, not just based on what you hear here, but based on really trying to put the students first and be more relational instead of transactional.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just going back to those, CTAs that Angela just had up on the screen, that's something that's a hard needle to move. So many, institutions or departments are just, entrenched in, the apply now, the learn more, the visit campus. And I will say that we are one of them. It is it's a hard transition to make. And so, if anybody does go to our site, and I'm not saying you have to, but we have those, traditional CTAs, still up on our site, but it is language as we work through, I've been working a lot on our communication plan for this upcoming cycle and looking through, at that inquiry level, are we saying apply now? Or are we saying, look at this program, or doing all of this type of trying to change our language again to be more conversational, to be more relevant to what the student is going through at the time, and make it more meaningful to them, because they'll get 100 messages that say apply now, apply
So
now,
many.
but if you can say something different, maybe it'll catch their attention, maybe they'll open the email, maybe they'll click through and do all that type of stuff. So looking at this shifts framework and just some of our partner emails that we do and some of our own internal stuff, it's just trying to, again, very minutely move that needle a little bit and see, what changes that we can make to ultimately, get us to where we need to be for, that next enrollment cycle. It's hard to do, but we are trying to do it.
Well, and even incremental change is change, right? So even, all steps are good steps, even if they're small ones. So there's no shame in that.
Exactly.
But so we've talked a little bit about this. Let's see. We talked about HTML and alt text a little bit. The user testing piece is definitely important. Lori, have you all done user testing with any prospective students or parents?
I believe our marketing team has, when it's come to, the redesign and, the accessibility on our site. I know that, looking for optimization for screen readers was very big, and some of the things that, I had like, I can't even remember what my plan was. I was like, oh my gosh, we need to do this on this particular page. I want it to look like this. And they're like, it can't, because the screen reader doesn't read it appropriately. It doesn't read it properly. Now, again, this was probably 2 years ago, so it might be time to revisit it with the new, technologies that are out there and the systems that are in place. But I do know it's easy for us, and as an admission office, to, try and get some student, just feedback from our current students, right? We have our student admission ambassadors, in our office. So at any point in time, I can just, step outside my office, be like, all right, I need 5 of you. Can you come in here, look at something? I need your opinion, or, marketing needs you. Who wants to, go upstairs for an hour and I'll buy you pizza, something like that. And so it's easy for us, me in particular, to get, a group of students to do some things. It's a little harder to get like parents or families on focus groups, but we've done that from time to time. So I do think it's an important step, depending on what it is that we're trying to accomplish at the time.
Yeah, I totally agree. Definitely take advantage of those students. It's amazing what free pizza or tacos or whatever the food of choice can
What
do.
people do for free food it's
incredible. It's incredible. Especially in that age group. So now, before we transition to our section on AI readiness, I am going to launch a poll. Let me just make sure it's working here. Sometimes it takes a second to launch, but I want to get a read on what folks are currently using in their AI toolkits. And you'll notice that no, this is not a comprehensive list. I was limited to 8 options by Wistia. So if you are in the other category, that can mean you are using nothing at all, or you are using something that is not listed here. But in either scenario, we would love for you to drop in the chat where you fall if you're in the other category. So I'm seeing lots and lots of chat GPT, no surprise there. A lot of Gemini, not as much love for the others, which is interesting.
I was gonna say maybe it's based on what your ecosystem is, where
Yeah,
you work.
yep.
ChatGPT seems to be a little bit more universal, but obviously Copilot is a Microsoft
Absolutely.
product, and
Yep. I expected a few more Gamma users just because I know that people love the automation with the presentations, but
and it's funny too because I've dabbled in Gamma, and I'm not. It's not my go-to for my presentations at the moment.
I feel like Gamma's polarizing. People either love it or it's mid, as my son would say.
Yeah.
I think I dabbled in it for a solid 15 seconds, and I'm with you, Lori. I was like, nah, I'm just gonna stay in my lane,
I'll
continue
run
to
some
use
things through it and see what it does, but I don't think I've used anything from it yet.
Yeah. This is okay. All right. So we've got almost everyone has voted. So I'm going to wrap us up here. So we have an overwhelmingly high percent with ChatGPT, which I anticipated, followed by Gemini and then Claude. Okay. I can live with that. Let me pop over to the chat just to see. Okay, we've got several. Oh, I use it. You know what? That's a great call out, Jeremy. It only lets you select one. That is one downside to the poll. And then we have Jamie, who uses most of those. Okay, all right. Is there anyone on the call who doesn't use anything at all before we continue? Just out of curiosity.
I was gonna say I'd be very surprised if somebody uses nothing.
If someone uses nothing, ChatGPT is definitely the low-hanging fruit. Okay, we don't have any takers. I think it's just because people are scared. Sometimes people don't want to be called out, but that's okay.
That's fine too. Amazingly enough, there's a lot of people in my office who are like, "Oh my gosh, have you seen? I just did this." And I'm like, "Well, what are you using?" They're like, "This great tool, ChatGPT." I'm like, "That's
Oh
great."
no.
I appreciate that. It's but AI is it can be polarizing, I think, sometimes because people don't want it
Absolutely.
to take away the creativity or the personalization or
Yeah.
the individualization, and as you mentioned earlier. So I can see both sides of it. It's all good.
100%. 100%. We support all of you, no matter where you stand. Lori, do you want to take us through a few use cases for how lots of folks are using AI in enrollment marketing currently?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's probably pretty obvious of why I'm here is because we do partner with Halda and use the AI student recruiter here at Lynn. And the partnership has been great. We started out with Halda a little over 3 years ago now, and it just started in one area with what is now called their AI form. So AI has progressed as our partnership has progressed. So we're certainly using that across our .edu site, and I'll talk about that in just a couple minutes here. But we have a lot of people who are individually within our office, using the Chat GPTs, the co-pilots, Gamma for presentations and things like that. It's if people are able to, kind of kickstart where they want to go with these tools, whether it's, for personal, enrichment, or as they're preparing to go out, for our road warriors to put those presentations together. Now, as a university, we do have a look and a feel and a brand that we have to maintain when people do go out with that. So they can use, a lot of these tools to help them get, started, but then it does still have to look and feel a certain way. But a lot of people get stuck when they're trying to write an email or write a text message. They know what they want to say, but they don't know how to say it. So it's these tools and having, this proliferation of AI tools available at their fingertips has, I think, certainly been a game changer, in the office, whereas people just they would come to me and be like, "Oh my gosh, I need to send this message. I don't even know where to begin." And I could give them ideas, but if I want it to be authentic to them, they need to come up with that starting point. And I think these tools are certainly helping them, and they're helping us from an enrollment marketing standpoint, an enrollment management standpoint, being able to reach more students more effectively with the information that they want. And we know they want it now. They're on their
Yeah.
phone, they want that instant gratification. So having the AI student recruiter on our site and being able to utilize, AI generated, phone conversations and text message conversations, and even having, some AI generated emails that are going back and forth has certainly, we've seen an uptick in, conversion rates and, completion of, questions, being answered with, favorable results. So it's certainly been eye-opening for us in enrollment management, and just, kind of at this point, it's just whetting our appetite. We want to know what we can, continue to do. How can we improve, the interactions that we have ourselves with AI, and how our prospective students can have, more enhanced interactions with AI as well.
I love that. And that's AI is a slippery slope in the best way. Once you start using it, once you start figuring out which tools work for which use cases, and once you start, most importantly, seeing the results and the time savings, that's where the magic really happens. And then you just want more and more and more and more, and you start to get really excited about it. We have a very good question that just came through. Looks like we've got one more as well. So this is Samantha, and I want to make sure I answer this question appropriately. She's asking if most of the AI tools listed are free or subscriptions. Samantha, are you talking about the ones on the screen right now, or the ones that were in the poll? Just for clarification.
And I will say, while we wait for that response, a lot of them you can dabble in for free, for sure,
Exactly.
to see what is available, to see what it can do for you. But a lot of the bells and whistles, or the full features, if you want to more than a 10 slide presentation, you then have to subscription or pay for it.
Exactly. And she did say in the poll, so all of those 100% you can dabble in for free. The one thing that I would say makes some use cases especially worth moving to a paid tier is when it comes to security and the use of your data. That piece you can turn off. There's a toggle in ChatGPT, for example, where you can tell it not to train the model on your interactions. But if you really, really want to preserve your institution's security, then you would be better off doing a paid enterprise version of one of these tools, just to make sure that you're getting that security layer. And then the follow-up question is, in simple terms, which AI tools listed in the polls are best for which tasks? I think I have my own opinions. Lori probably has hers. And then we might have some folks on the call who might fight us on both. But in my personal experience, I would say ChatGPT is definitely a utility player. It can be used for a lot of different things, from ideation to brainstorming to research. I had some tasks set up. It doesn't allow for tasks anymore since they've switched to agents, but I created a task that I still receive. So for anybody on the call who created a task, your task still exists. You just can't make new ones. But I created a task for ChatGPT to act as my marketing coach and send me a list of marketing tactics every morning at 10 a.m. that I could implement in less than 15 minutes based on the tech stack that I had available. And so every weekday at 10 a.m., I get an email from ChatGPT with 3 ideas that I can either take or leave, but it helps keep the creative juices going. It's super customized. And my understanding from friends of mine who have also used that prompt is that it lends itself very well to other industries. And so ChatGPT is great for a lot of different things. I have found Claude to be great for everything from research to, I mentioned in the chat, it can actually create some HTML code. So I had an email from a designer that I needed to translate into the actual image into HTML to put it into HubSpot, which is what we use for email. It did it beautifully. I made a couple refinements, but I was able to skip the HTML coding classes I never took and ask Claude to do that for me. And the list goes on and on. There's a lot of, Microsoft Copilot, I don't have experience with because I don't use Microsoft.
Mhm.
We use Google internally, lots of folks do, but you'll find that to be most common with folks who are Microsoft users. Same with Gemini for people who are in Google Workspace because you can use its premium version for free. They're very similar. So, I mean, we could do a whole session probably just on different different tools. But there are some very, very, I would say, experiment, just get in there, get your hands dirty, see what works for you, and go from there. Because I think we've all got different ideas about what we like to use for different reasons.
And just really quickly, because you can dabble in pretty much everything for free. Just
Yes,
really quickly, I was testing out. I would give Chat GPT and Copilot the same prompt. I would pit them against
a
each
great
other.
tip. Yes,
Just to see what they came up with because, from an enrollment management standpoint, you're talking to high school students who are looking for colleges, you're looking for transfer students, parents of those students. We also have a graduate program, so we're talking to, more adult students. We, so many different populations. I want to get the same message across to 5 different populations. So I would pit the 2 agents, AI agents against each other to see who could, which one I liked. And then I would tweak, and you can kind of go down a rabbit hole with these
you really
prompts
can.
and these different AI tools. And sometimes it's great. And sometimes you're like, I can't believe I just spent 45 minutes working on one text message because I was like, well, no, change this, change this. I want to hear it for this. So it can be fun, but I will, fair warning, you can go down some rabbit holes, and
Yes.
then you kind of have more questions than you had when you started because you're like, okay, well, it can do this, but it couldn't do this. And it's a slippery slope.
It is. It is. The slope can get very slippery, but it can be a lot of fun. And
Exactly.
maybe we'll do a session on different use cases for different tools because it sounds like some folks are definitely looking for that. So stay tuned. Stay tuned. So now we're going to talk about integration before we get into some cool examples from Lori's institution, Lynn University. Lori, take us away.
Yeah, I think, it depends on, your team, your use cases, the institution as a whole. We touched upon earlier, what is the AI policy, and that is something we're working on here at Lynn. We do have some AI integrations that we'll share in just a second. But, we want to be very clear that it's an AI agent, that prospective students or anybody who might land on our site is talking with, if they're going to have a phone call, we're very clear that it is, Lance is our school mascot. That is our AI's name when, they talk to him on the phone or, via text message. But we're clear with that. But then there are so many different AI tools out there. Everybody wants to work with a different one. Everybody wants the enterprise version of it. They want all the
Mhm.
bells and the whistles. We can't implement all of them. There are fees associated with these when you come with enterprise tools. Is it just for, the admission team? Is it for the entire enrollment management team? Is it for the entire university? So those are things that are being discussed at multiple levels at our university, which I'm sure they're being discussed at other, institutions as well. As long as we're willing to do them personally right now, we're okay doing that. And like I said, I believe probably 95% of our office at this point is using some sort of AI, on the daily to, work through some things. But we've been fortunate enough to partner with Halda to have, that AI student recruiter there. And it does integrate with Slate, with our CRM, so that we can, start building those connections with students now, and then working with our marketing department for, inclusion on the .edu site, so as far as it comes into, the CMS, with, making sure that we have scripts on the page so that the AI can, scrub our website to, get appropriate answers and things like that. So it was an easy implementation when we made the choice to do it, but the planning and the making sure that you're using the right tool at the right place at the right time. I suggest, making sure you spend the time on the upfront as opposed to trying to implement multiple things really quickly, because then you don't know what's going to work and how it's going to work. It's, again, I think unfortunately AI has just blown up in the marketplace. Everybody wants to get go all in all at once.
Yeah.
It's figuring out what works best and where do we need it now to make that first step, get your toe wet and then figure out where to go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's great advice. All right,
But
it's
like
show
I
and
said,
tell time. Show and
here
tell
we go.
time.
So on the screen, you can see, a couple of our Lynn examples where you see Explore Lynn. That is our AI form that pops up when anybody visits our visit page on our .edu site. So we want to, grab, people might come to that visit page, but they might not click on that, request info button on the right-hand side. So we want to deliver that form, front and center to them. So we go through a couple screens, ask them a couple questions, comes through like almost instantaneously to our Slate CRM. We do have that integration there. But the great thing about the AI form with Halda now is as soon as they hit submit, the prospective student is delivered information right then and there based on the things that they answered on the form. If they pick biology on that first screen, they get a little, blurb about biology with a link through to our program page on our site. Further down on that completion page, again, they've never even left this page that they started on. They can have that phone call with an AI agent. They can have a text conversation with that AI agent, or they can, find out who their admission counselor is. We have prompts that are there for them to do a little bit more exploring, to, connect with their admission counselor or ask a question in our AI form. We'll scrub our website to deliver that information to them if they didn't ask it within the form, or we didn't ask that particular question in this form that they landed on the visit page. We have multiple forms throughout the admission section of our .edu site that serve up different forms. If they land on a financial aid page, we'll give them a cost calculator type, form to fill out. How much is it going to cost? How much merit scholarship will I get if my GPA is between this and this? We always put the disclaimer on there that this is just an estimate. This is not guaranteed by any stretch of the imagination, but we're trying to meet the students or the prospective, family where they are. We have some that, give them videos when they get their answers. We're trying some new things to find out where they're from. Again, not asking 17 questions. We just need the basic information to get them into our CRM. But if we can start that conversation here, we can serve them up with some more individualized responses. The screenshot on the right where you see Slate is building AI apps, I guess is for lack of a better term, into our, CRM as well. That example right there on the screen is if I wanted to send a one-off email to Lori because I know she needs to submit her housing forms or whatever it is, but I don't know where to start, or I haven't provided what you see on the right hand side. There are snippets. We can kind of give like pre-canned, canned responses that people can move into the emails and, tweak as they need. But we can put a prompt right here that what you see on the screen is, tell Lori she needs to submit her housing forms. Otherwise she's not going to get her top choice, into the new Banyan residence hall. And AI will generate an email here that is then fully editable once it's in the system, for that particular student. And we can do those one-offs where there is now more AI capability within Slate that was just announced at their conference last month. So AI is making its way into
Everything.
into every CRM that's out there. So, if it's not part of whatever system you use right now, I'm sure it's on the horizon.
It's coming. It's coming for sure. And that's actually a great segue into our section on COMFLOs. So this is a really big one, whether you refer to these as COMFLOs or in the K-12 world, communication sequences, email flows. Oh, yes, Patty, there will be a recording and we'll be sending that to you tomorrow. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. But this is a big one because this is something that Evergreen, we're constantly communicating with students. So we have a few tips for you all here, just some high level items before we talk a little bit more about how we've chosen to approach this at Halda with a few more examples from Lynn.
Yeah, so I mean, what Angela has on the slide here, I think we all know that who work in communication, we're getting past the point where it's, one message. It's not a one message fits all any longer. We have to do more segmentation, more individualization, and it's more than just, hi Lori, hi Angela, or I see you're interested in insert major here. And from a communication standpoint, that can be, really hard when it comes time to building those communications. You can put all the merge fields in that you want, but then trying to come up with all of that content for the biology majors, the criminal justice majors, the advertising majors, the data analytics majors, building it all into the system so that if it's, this major, plug this in, which is great, it's more individualized content, but then it sounds kind of choppy. Does it make sense with the first sentence that you typed in and you're just plugging this in? Using, AI and the tools that are available, and working with, organizations like Halda, we have a email system kind of going back and forth for people who utilize those forms. It's delivering the information that they were looking at and for on our website via email, kind of as a follow-up, written from the AI. The AI has been learning, where they're going, what they're doing, what our style is, to serve up what they want, how they want it as a follow-up, giving them links, but because it's more tailored to what they were specifically talking about, it's more applicable, it's more timely, it's those immediate results that people want to see. So it's trying to look at those different segments and utilizing AI, like at the inquiry stage. How are we going to get them to apply? How many times do we need to email them to apply? How do we tailor it for students in South Florida, which is where Lynn is located, versus those who are in the Northeast, versus those who are out West? And now I'm actually to the point where I'm excited about writing emails again, because I can use AI to help me hit all of these different populations, where before it was like, I can only my brain only has time for 3 versions today. So how do I segment, 50,000 names into 3 populations? Now, building it and using the tools that are available does take time. It's not just a, snap of your fingers and it's set up and ready to go, but it does allow us that flexibility to be more thoughtful with our segmentation, to be more, what's the word I'm looking for? Strategic with our
Yeah.
segmentation, to, try and reach the folks that we want, how we want, when we want, and all those, lovely things that all of us are trying to do with our time, and make it more meaningful and more impactful.
That's a perfect segue into this little section here. So this is another one where, if you have seen any Halda presentations in the recent past, you may have seen this slide. And I'm just going to click through the animation so that you can see exactly what this workflow looks like and why that type of personalization and one-to-one versus one-to-many approach is so relevant right now. So Netflix and Amazon are great examples of businesses that have solved for the types of generic one-to-many communications that are still pretty common in our space, and others. Education is not the only guilty party here, but it's still definitely happening. But these are also platforms that all of your prospective students and families are engaging with on a regular basis. And as a result of that, these are the platforms that are shaping their expectations, including what they expect from you. And so it starts with this onboarding section where they get to understand the user's preferences. They let you discover content, and that, Netflix remembers everything, as you know, especially if you, like me, have a child who occasionally goes onto your profile to watch things. But it allows you to discover things that are very unique to you. It recommends content based on your history, what you've watched, what you've liked, what you've said is not for me, with the thumbs that it gives you at the end of watching your program. And then it continues to give you personalized content notifications to get you to keep coming back to the site, right? This is basically how Halda has applied Netflix and Amazon's approach to admissions. So I'm going to go through and animate all of these here as well. So very similar flow. We have our onboarding, period, where you're upgrading your RFI forms or your inquiry forms if you're in the K-12 space to an AI form. That discovery period is what Lori referred to earlier, where you have a student who's provided some answers on the form. They're using your website as a knowledge base to pull all of the responses through, and then they get immediate content recommendations based on their behavioral history. And then they get personalized content notifications to get them to keep coming back. And so this is a little bit of a zoom in on that. These are some screenshots from our AI Student Recruiter, which Lori mentioned. And we just released the latest round of product updates on our blog. So definitely take a peek at that. You'll see these screenshots. And this shows just how far you can customize your communication sequences if you have the right tools in place. So this is a student who engaged with Lynn's website with a specific interest in biology. They wanted to be contacted through text, and now Lance, the mascot, is connecting with them, engaging with them, continuing that conversation on a one-to-one basis. And they're doing that by referencing information from this fictitious student who was on the website exploring and is looking for additional information. So you can see that this is a very different feeling, a very different vibe from just getting a bunch of emails with your name at the top. This is much more personalized. We're meeting students where they are with those little devices that they're carrying around in their pockets in a format that they're very familiar with and very comfortable with, and it's super personalized. And then Lori, I'll let you speak to this one, but this is just a little look at some of the impact that Lynn has seen by using this approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So once we, partnered with Halda and we implemented that AI student recruiter, shortly thereafter, tech was updating and changing, and we now have what we call the comeback email. Students interact with the AI either via phone or text message. That information comes to our Slate instance, but it also comes through with AI generated content that we plug into our Lynn emails, our template, our format. So it looks like, it's still coming from us. It's coming from our system, tagging to the student's record, but we're sending that back out the next day, I believe, is that follow-up message. And, everybody likes, click-through rates and, open rates and all of that type of stuff, which is great. A 25%, email click-through rate is pretty outstanding at this point in time in the game. But the bigger number, that 45% re-engagement is just fantastic for us to see, because it's not just a one and done. It's an email that somebody gets, they look at it, okay, great. I've looked at it, wonderful. But they're clicking through, they're coming back to our .edu site, because that's where we're driving them. We're not taking them elsewhere. We're taking them to information on our site that they were interested in, not just they came to our site, did something, we're like, okay, now we're going to promote Visit to You. Yeah, we're still going to promote Visit to You in a certain time frame, but that's not what you were looking for. You were talking about biology, you were looking at financial aid, and wanted to know about the residence halls. That's what we served back to you. And now they're coming back to look deeper into the financial aid information on our site, or more in depth into the biology program here at Lynn. And the AI recruiter through those forms is available 24/7. That's no human can do that, as much as we all might want to try. I'm guilty of that, but we can't be available 24/7. And we're in South Florida. Not all of our students come from South Florida. They're not in the East time zone. They're West Coast, or they're, in India, which is several hours ahead of us. We are, Lynn has an international population. So all hours of the day and night, we're getting emails, we're getting messages. But, if we're here, we're not up at 2 a.m. Most of us aren't anyway, answering emails, but we're seeing a lot of that interaction with the AI agent happening after, the quote unquote normal business hours. And just seeing, that re-engagement from those emails with the students coming back to our site and continuing to go elsewhere. We're tracking them to seeing how much time they're spending on the site it's a great number to see. And it's just reinforcing that this is the type of content that we need to be serving our students.
That's perfect. And here, I won't go through this line by line, but we do have some very, very, very simple flows that you can consider as you're thinking about modifying or adjusting your comm flows going into this next cycle. Again, we'll be providing a link to the presentation in addition to the recording tomorrow. So it's okay if we move through a few of these quickly. I want to make sure we still have a few minutes for questions. So now we're going to wrap with tech stack optimization. And what tends to happen, especially in very decentralized institutions, is that you can have so many tools but the strategy can get a little lost. So we've got some tips for looking at your tech stack here, taking that inventory of all the things to the best that you can, not just to look for redundancies and gaps, but really think about what your spend looks like. I think that's a really important piece. Make sure that you don't have any leaks in your budget that you don't know about, and look for opportunities for consolidation as well, which is something that we've actually supported a lot of our partners with, is finding room in the budget where you might be able to move some things around because of some redundancies that you find in that process. And as you are choosing and integrating new tools, we have some tips for you here that are really important. Lori was actually kind enough to be part of a panel that we had internally just to hear from some of our partners about their process of going through and looking at vendors and what they think about. And so in addition to what's listed here, definitely tap into your networks as well. Make sure that you're asking for those referrals, that you're asking the questions that you may not necessarily get answered on a pitch, just to make sure that you're really getting a chance to peek behind the curtain. We have some tips on that I'll be sharing in a blog post after this as well. Lots of good blog content for you. And then here we have a lovely sample chart that you can use if you're evaluating vendors, along with some things that you can look at. So what are the core functions? What are the integrations like? Does it integrate with all of your tools, some of your tools? What's a must-have? What's more of a nice-to-have? Is it more of a one-off or point solution? Is it more comprehensive? What is the cost? And if you're in a position where you're able to do some testing with a vendor, definitely take a look at the results that you get and ask around about those things too. Most vendors will be able to point to results that they've gotten on behalf of their partners, but you can also, as you're having conversations with some of your peers and colleagues, you dig into some of that as well. So now we have our wrap up. We've got a little bit of homework for you, and then we'll have just a few minutes for some Q&A. But if you have a question that we don't get to, please reach out to me or Lori. I'll include our info in the follow-up that you receive tomorrow in case you've got some lingering questions and want to talk shop or dig into more of what we've talked about here. So we talked about the importance of keeping your data clean, and you can do that with regular audits. You can do that by having some really solid standards in place. Lori had some great ideas that she shared around that. Making sure that your website is fast. We didn't dig into speed too much, but for all the reasons that we talked about, prospective students and parents being really excited about the Amazons and Netflixes of the world, speed is part of that too. They want that immediacy, so you really want to look for that. If you're thinking about AI, start small. I would even say start on an individual level. That's what I did. Lots of folks who I know that have been in the space for a bit, that's where they started. Just do some tinkering with recipes or planning a trip or responding to an email from somebody in your book club. There's a lot of different things that you can do to experiment before you bring it over into the workplace. Personalization, 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 with individualization being even better. That means merge fields are no longer enough. So try to do your best to customize your Conflow content as much as you can for different stages, different personas. At the individual level is even better. Definitely try to be consistent with that. And then with your tech stack, simplification is always key. If you're able to do it, if you can't, control the controllables. Do what you can in your office, on your team. Start there. Pay attention to those integrations. Automate as much as you can without losing your humanity. And then we have homework. So here are a few ideas for some things that you can try once we wrap. Starting with a quick audit all the way down to a tech stack review. I won't go line by line because, again, we'll be sharing this presentation with you. And I want to make sure we've got a couple of minutes for questions. And so I am going to end us there and open up the Q&A for folks who have a couple minutes to hang on and ask some questions. Oh, I love this. We've got a comment. Thank you, Jared. Google Lighthouse is a great free tool built into Chrome to start with for evaluating website accessibility, speed, etc. Yes, I'm a big fan of Lighthouse, and that is an awesome pro tip. Thank you for sharing that, Jared. I cannot believe we have no questions.
I cannot believe it's 3 o'clock already.
I know. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's why. Okay, here we go. One just popped in. Oh, this is an excellent question from Denise. What was the most difficult part of implementation of Halda for Lori?
I would say from an implementation standpoint, the actual, the nuts and bolts of it, that was easy. Once we figured out what we were going to do with it and creating the forms, Halda has been great. They have a lot of out of the box forms to put, on your website. Finding the right one wasn't that difficult. Quite frankly, it was trying to determine which pages on our site needed that little extra boost right at the beginning. We started with Halda and the forms and the AI forms for our graduate program specifically at first, and then we, expanded to our undergraduate program. But so that we didn't have a form popping up on every page that somebody visited, it was, picking and choosing the right place to start, and then how to, grow out from that and not just inundate visitors to our site with things that they might not be interested in. Putting it onto mainly admission pages first and then expanding from there. We actually have the AI hub enabled with Halda now, so that if Angela came to our visit page on lynn.edu, she was served a form. Now she can see some other forms when she comes back because she's been served a hub. She doesn't necessarily have to go to those pages, but she can see some of the other types of things that we're offering through the AI capabilities in the partnership with Halda. So you can go as little or as big as you want with Halda. It's just figuring out where to start and how to start to do it scalably.
That's a great point. And then we have another question, which I love. What has the student feedback been like for Student Recruiter thus far?
It's nothing necessarily that we hear, that somebody, actually calls the office to be like, oh my gosh, I had such a great interaction with that. But the AI recruiter has an opportunity for people to leave comments. They can do a thumbs up, thumbs down on their interaction and leave comments as to, how did that interaction go? And overwhelmingly, we don't get a ton of feedback. Now, definition of a ton is, a little different, for different folks. But I would say the majority of that feedback has all been positive. People have said, they got the answers that they were looking for, quickly and easily. And they liked having that ease of connection with the AI recruiter. And again, we're delivering to where the students are at that point in time. They don't have to wait for an email response from a live person. They don't have to wait for somebody to pick up the phone, because we're all in meetings. And if we don't answer that phone call right away, it's like, they do a round robin trying to get somebody on the phone because they need an answer immediately. I think we can utilize the AI recruiter more. We're just, again, we started small. We're trying to expand, that footprint of it, but overwhelmingly the responses have been positive.
I love that. That's awesome. And since we are 3 minutes over, I'm going to end us with that incredible sentiment. But thank you to everyone who joined us this afternoon. Thank you to those of you who hung on for an extra 4 minutes. That's the end of the session. And again, you'll receive this recording tomorrow in addition to some resources that we have referenced throughout and a copy of the deck. Thanks again for joining us. And we hope to see you in August for our next webinar. Have a great rest of the week. And thank you, Lori.
Thank you.